Hi, Nick. Thank you very much for taking part in the Business Spotlight series. I'm going to hand it straight over to you to introduce yourself and what you do.
Okay, thanks, Ed. So I'm Nick Rickard. I'm the CEO of a company called Juliet Rose Investment Distribution, and we work with project owners who are seeking to raise capital via debt or equity, typically institutional projects, so in size from 20 million upwards. I think our largest project is currently about 7 billion. And we just work with project owners, CEOs, typically, to help them find investors in very simple terms. So we're a cross between an investment marketing company and an investment placement agent.
Okay, interesting. And 7 billion sounds interesting. Is that one you can divulge what it is, or is it confidential?
It's a huge smart city in Sweden.
Fantastic.
Um, very nice, but it's starting from scratch basically, with a nuclear power plant, a deep water port, a big data center, and it's all green, by the way, and then some residential and commercial bolted on at the end.
Fantastic. So obviously, yeah, we spoke briefly before as well. It's,
Yeah,
it's a very international feel to what you do.
yeah. So our projects range from Vietnam across to the States, um, and we focus on renewables, so clean energy, green impact projects,
Hmm.
real estate, and infrastructure predominantly nowadays.
Fantastic. And in terms of the sort of clients that you have, I guess is it a mixture of private and government?
Very much. So we work with multi-family offices. We work with fund managers. We work with credit funds who are happy to operate a debt facility. And we work with one or two of the royal families from the Middle East as well.
Very interesting. And how long have you done that for?
We've been going about 3.5 years now, um, yeah, under the guise of Juliet Rose anyway. Um, but on and off, probably about 4.5 years.
Oh, very
So
interesting. And so, I mean, obviously, I guess it was interesting times with COVID, sort of reasoning into the start of the business as it is now. What was the impact of that on the business?
COVID was actually interesting for us because we hadn't long set up the business. And so for us, it meant we were able to get in touch with people who we wouldn't normally get an opportunity to do so, predominantly because you had a lot of business CEOs sitting at home. And once they'd got bored with the first week or two of COVID, they were keen to do stuff. And so what it meant was from from our perspective, finding investors isn't always easy and it takes time to nurture relationships. But what it did mean that people were accessible. And so instead of chief investment officers being in a meeting, on a train, plane, automobile, whatever, they were all actually very accessible. And so it enabled us to grow our network a little bit quicker than we would have done.
Hmm.
So for us, it was a bit of a positive.
Excellent. That's always good to hear. And in terms of the business and where you like to take it, what are the aspirations for the next 5 years?
That's an interesting question, and one we've sort of mulled over internally quite a lot. I think the initial thought was, let's make some money and let's buy a house in the sun and work from there. But I think in an ideal world, we'd like to turn it into a family office of our own and co-invest with our investors.
Oh, very interesting. And in terms of the other side of that, then, what are the challenges for the industry that
The,
you're in?
the challenges are quite a lot. So the challenges are putting the right project in front of the right buyer at the right time. Because, as I'm sure you're aware, in the investment world, appetites change very quickly. And so, what can be the flavor 1 month, 3 months later, it's moved on, it's something else. So, you have that challenge. The other challenge is getting the project owners who want to raise the capital to provide the information needed for the investor in a quick and timely manner. And again, a lot of them are sort of entrepreneurial. And so paperwork isn't always perhaps their best thing. And they're often traveling, they're busy, they're in meetings, working 16, 18 hours a day to get the business up and running. And, you know, we need them to set aside an hour a day to work with us. And so that can be a challenge at times. So it's managing expectations on both sides.
Yeah, no, that's
you know, but the real trick is opening the door to the buyer. You know, that's always the hard part. Is finding buyers who want that specific project. So let's just pick a project. So if you've got a large real estate development, you know, the creation of a resort, for example, on an island in the Caribbean, which we have at present, you know, that doesn't appeal to everybody who likes real estate. But it does appeal to those investors who like, you know, resort development, who like impact projects and things like that. So it's about sort of doing your homework. So when we get a project, we probably never take it to more than 25 people. We're not one of these companies that bangs out a, you know, 5,000 email marketing campaign. We will send out teasers and we'll pick up the phone and we'll hold Zoom calls, but we probably never take a project to more than 20, 25 people. And one of the benefits of that is because we try and do it under the radar. When we do that, they know the project is off market and that we have it exclusively, so they won't have seen it from elsewhere.
And so, and when you're getting your investors, is there a sort of minimum number that they're investing in each project?
So the minimum amount we look at is a project is 20 million. So where they're looking to raise 20 million. So a lot of the times, because we're dealing only with institutional investors, they will have a minimum ticket size themselves. That could be 20, it could be 25. In some instances with the big funds, it's 100. You know, so it's every project is different because of the needs of the project owner and whether it's debt or equity. So if you're just looking for, you know, borrowing capital, then you take it to a different set of investors to those who would invest equity into the business.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, it sounds like a very varied and interesting role because the projects vary and the investors vary, etc. What would you say has been the biggest learning you've had over the last 4 years or so?
Don't trust anyone. A lot of people have said they'll do things and don't, and you learn that. A lot of people have said they are the buyer and they aren't. And so we've sort of whittled down our process over the last few years to a point where, so we do work with other parties from time to time, but if they've got a Yahoo, a Google or a Gmail or, you know, a Proton Mail email address, we won't work with them simply because they're not the you know, the persons they often purport to be. But more importantly, if somebody can't be bothered to spend £20 a year on a company email address, it raises questions. They're just brokers, and you know these are the guys that are just going to be pinging out emails, which actually destroys your own reputation.
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah, it's important then who you're associated with.
Yeah, so now we just try and deal with the project owner and the purse string holder on the other side. And, you know, our role is to facilitate the move from the project owner having the project to somebody investing in the project or lending in money for the project. And so that involves ensuring all the pitch deck, all the presentations, all the paperwork are correct for the investor, but also, you know, going through numerous Zoom calls with all the parties, making sure everybody's happy, making sure the DD is done correctly up until the point of investment.
And what was it that led you into the business in the first place?
Well, my background was very much institutional sales, working for some well-known fund managers like Evan de Rothschild, Barclays Global Investors, BlackRock, you know, amongst others, an Islamic investment bank. And I think what sort of led us to this was we were actually asked if we could assist someone in raising some capital. And, you know, basically my role in the past had always been selling, head of sales, institutional sales team. My partner was a retained headhunter who'd actually placed me in a role some years ago. which is how we became friends. And he was working with a lot of board level people, placing people at board level, you know, in the debt capital market space. And we were asked if we could help raise some capital, as I said. And we thought, actually, why don't we just do that? You know, instead of, with all due respect to the companies I've worked with, you know, if you're selling a fund, and let's say it's an equity fund, for argument's sake, going back to the same buyers going, this equity fund is better than the last one I sold you, doesn't always work. You know, an equity fund is an equity fund, whether it be active, quant, or passive. There's only so much you can say about it. If you've got a project, you know, not only can you express the benefits of the project, but also when you get the project owner, you get that passion because it's their baby. And no one can sell a project better than the project owner.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. It's a good point, and definitely a distinction between, I guess, the things that perhaps you were selling before and what you're doing now.
Yeah.
What would you say is your source of inspiration?
I think we all just like success. You know, we've all worked, you know, all the members of our team have been involved in some form of fund management sale, whether it be, you know, board level people, whether it be funds, whatever. And I think we're all driven by success. But in terms of inspiration, that's a difficult question, because I think the inspiration comes from within. It's more aspiration rather than inspiration in terms of, you know, what do we want to achieve? And, you know, we can see where other parties have done similar and have, you know, grown into reasonable sized companies that have grown into reasonable sized family offices, and they've started out in a similar way. So I think what we're doing is slightly different to a lot of them. And so our role isn't to compare ourselves to anybody else. Our aim is simply to get where we want to be. So as I say, it's more, you know, what do we, you know, aspiration rather than inspiration, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah, fantastic. Thank you. And then look, as a final thing, is there any news or any sort of offer you'd like to extend to the audience?
Look, I think, you know, what we would say is twofold. You know, if your audience is project owners looking to raise capital, then they should certainly give us a call, as long as they're the project owner and not a broker, as we said. But by the same token, you know, if your audience involves investors who are looking for particularly renewable energy projects and want to make a difference, you know, again, what we have, they won't see anywhere else. You know, we have some really interesting projects that have the opportunity to make a massive difference going forward globally. You know, just some of the projects we seem to be offered is actually quite, I mean, that's probably where the inspiration comes from, is because you can make a difference. And so we all focus on different things within the business, but renewables is probably the one where we all focus together, because it's such an important topic. And so, you know, when you look at what's going on around the world, when you look at, you know, carbon emissions and everything like that, where you can make a difference is some of the projects. And some of the ones we've seen, we're blown away by. You know, and a good example, just to give you one, is we work with a company that has data centers. And obviously data centers with everything, you know, with AI, with 5G and things like that, you know, very important moving forward. But data centers emit an awful lot of heat. Now, this particular company has worked out a way to self-cool the data centers and regenerate that heat. So 95% of that heat is then reused, and it provides heating and hot water for municipalities across Europe. So each data center can provide heating and hot water for 100,000 people. And it's clean, and it's clean. And so, you know, all that heat would normally go up into the ether. Now it's being used. So little things like that where you think, well, actually, that's pretty good. But
Yeah.
of course, this is the difference between the UK and Europe, is that in the UK, my house can offer can work with different energy providers to my next door neighbour. In Europe, it's not like that. So a municipality will all have the same hot heating provider. And the mayor, the local mayor, is elected on his green principles. So you can see why this is becoming important. So we have a lot of projects that are like that, that are different, but going to make a huge difference.
Indeed. Yeah, that's really, it's always great to hear of innovation that is actually helping the planet as well. So yeah, really interesting.
Yeah, no, so we've got some really, really cool stuff that, to be honest, we wouldn't have even heard of half of this. And what we do is, when we look at an appraiser project, is we look at the management team, look at the project, look at the financials, make sure it all ticks the box, and make sure it's all of investment grade status. Makes our life easier when it is. It's not been written on the back of a postage stamp in someone's bedroom,
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you very much for sharing a bit more about
my pleasure.
It sounds great, and I'm looking forward to seeing some of these projects come to fruition. I'll certainly be looking out for the new Swedish smart city for a start, and certainly as well when we see these the data hubs that are basically green coming in force, then we'll know where it started.
Absolutely. Listen, appreciate your time.
So thanks very much, Nick.
Thanks, Ed.